wanted to do was just to maybe drop into your heads like 3 or 4 ideas that are kind of useful working methodologies for how these 4 projects are being constructed. And for most of the work that I made. And I just want to kind of suggest them to you and take the chance to in some way overtone the work of these ideas. And then I suppose then I'll move into some sort of more anecdotal mode and talk specifically about the subject matter of each of the pieces. But is that okay? Does that kind of make sense? And if I'm not being very clear about anything or waffling on in a direction that seems extraordinarily boring, please tell me to stop or ask a question. Okay? The first piece I wanted to speak about is the work here, which is called Latoon. And it was made, the video was made in the summer of 2006. And it's 8 minutes long, and it's been shown in several different contexts and different scenarios over several years. And I always want to show it. And so I brought it here, and I didn't know whether it would fit in with the rest. I knew I was going to make one piece in that room over there, and then have these other 2 works. So I wasn't really sure if this piece was going to fit in on Monday, and then we had a nice chat on Monday night about it. We thought it would be a good idea, right? And with this piece and a lot of the other work, there's kind of this notion in some way about working in a mode very similar to being a historian, where there's an active objectification going on, or an attempt to actually look at a scenario as neutrally as possible. Which of course is an impossible thing to do, but there's a kind of gesture about trying to gather this material so that in some way through the gallery spaces or through the notion of dissemination of the publications or how we're all on the internet and this sort of stuff, that this material can live and kind of breathe and be present in terms of the public discourse or public realm that we all encounter. And the reason for that is most of the material here is kind of exists in some way in my mind as a blind spot, or it's very close to the certain perceptions of, say, public art that we know about, or motorway building, and you all know about the DeLorean, the car factory, or buildings in the city. So these are really, for me, accessible topics or subjects. But it's actually to try and investigate them to see something that's like a blind spot that you can't quite see or isn't in the kind of perceptual vision that we have as cultural, that we have when we're engaged with cultural pursuit. So there's a somewhat aspirational quality for me about the pieces that this material can be dragged into a gallery space or be produced into a gallery space and have an existence there. And that's not to be an authority on it. I don't want to be an authority about the DeLorean car factory, nor about trees out in County Clare. That's not my interest. Instead, I'm much more interested in actually placing the work here, and then somebody comes along and says, oh, actually here's another thing that's useful in this pursuit or this investigation, or yeah, I knew a guy who worked in the factory and he told me that, or you know, so in some way the material has its life and it exists by that notion of taking it from a peripheral location where we're not exactly, or where in general as a popular consciousness we're not looking at it, and then moving it into this place. Is that useful? Yeah, okay. So, and most of this kind of operates in general around sometimes video works, a lot of photography and a lot of contextual material that in some ways tagged on to them is used as a framing device for very particular things. I mean, for example, if you look at the photographs of the underwater scenes there, unless you actually feed through the contextual material to get to them, they're just photographs of crabs, you know? So these are devices that are at play, and I like the idea that there's various stratas of information going on. I suppose, like we were talking about last night, John, about the conceptual art and that use of information. And that's about respecting an audience and nourishing an audience, rather than a certain notion about art making that I find quite difficult, but the notion that you always reduce and you simmer down to some artistic essence, you know? And of course that goes on here, but it's always nice to have these comparisons and bounce them against each other. The video was made in 2006. It features a guy called Eddie Lenihan. He's a folklorist and player and a storyteller. He goes around Clare interviewing and taping conversations with a lot of people, elderly men and women in the neighbourhood, and so has gathered up a very large archive of material in the last 35 years. It's very much, it's not an academic pursuit. None of the Irish studies colleges in America or anything like that would be on to him about getting the archive, you know, so he's very much on the periphery. He does his own books. He turned up like he did a nice storytelling evening for us last year, brings all his merchandise and sells it afterwards. So it's a very independent operation in some sense. And through gathering this material, he'll often speak about, you would go and talk to people for 2 or 3 days at a time. And so there's a certain repertoire, you know, people have stories and they'll tell stories for maybe a day or two, and they'll have those stories very polished and they'll know about them. And he says you kind of get to a certain stage then that a lot of the people he interviews run out of stories, and then it goes into the real repressed memories. So it's a really interesting procedure that he's involved in terms of gathering local folklore there. And through this process, he came to know about this bush that's detailed, a whitethorn bush that's detailed in the video. And the bush was up on top of a hill until 1999, when European community money came along to build a dual carriageway on the site. It's very close to Shannon Airport in County Clare. And he led a campaign saying that actually, and this road was going to roll, steam roll over the bush and destroy the bush. So he led this campaign about saving the bush because it was where the fairies of Munster would gather before they go into battle against the fairies of Connaught. And his theory was that, and so you had a lot of angry fairies arriving on this particular site, this particular hill, ready to go revving into battle in Connaught. And if the bush was removed, you'd have all these fairies arriving, having no central meeting point to strategize for the battle ahead. And they'd take their angst out on the motorists on the road. And so it's quite fantastical, and it's really an interesting clash in one sense of the use of the site. The site is this piece of folklore history of fairies, and then suddenly it's steamrolled by the modernity of a dual carriageway, now a motorway on the place. So he led a campaign, it got picked up by CNN as a kind of leprechaun Irish story, you know. Got into the New York Times, and the certain pressures that came from that notion of it being placed into a very exponentially large media circus made the county council turn the road slightly around the bush, and it was a triumph for him. And a very beautiful story in my mind, you know. Of course, Brian Free